Hey there, Blue Mages, Liam here, and welcome to the Blue Academy Raid Guide for Eden's Promise Eternity Savage, or E12S, Phase 1. Although this is the third fight in the Eden series, this is the first video I'm putting out since this is the one most people have been struggling with. A lot of the mechanics play out the way they would for traditional jobs, but there are some quirks on certain mechanics, but there are some adjustments that we can make to make them consistent. Anyway, let's jump right in. For this fight, I recommend one tank mimic, one or two healer mimics, and then the rest DPS mimics. If you have a really confident healer, you can get away with one healer, but there's not really a huge benefit to doing so. You'll probably still see most of the mechanics anyway. It's just that for the other fights, one healer is better, so you can still do that here, but I would recommend picking up a second one because there's quite a bit of damage going out. Utility spells that everyone needs for this phase are Mighty Guard and Diamondback. The tank and the healers should bring Magic Hammer, and then one of the healers should bring Frog Legs and a Veil to handle the tank busters later. If you can add some extra Magic Hammers just for mitigation in general, it's pretty helpful, but it's not strictly required. The boss opens up with Maleficium, a heavy-hitting raid-wide we'll see several times throughout the fight. This is survivable with just a single mitigation, so if you want to, you can have a non-healer use Gobskin and be put right into Revenge Blast range. For the first one, this doesn't really help much since you'll be waning after Moonflute, but it is something to consider for future raid-wides. Personally, I don't think there's a huge benefit to trying to squeeze in Revenge Blast. If you're super giga gamers, you could potentially skip Lions, but Lions is actually not that difficult anyway, so you might as well just deal with it. Next, the boss will cast either Junction Shiva or Junction Titan. It's completely random which is cast. We'll talk about Shiva first since it's the most straightforward one. In Junction Shiva, each player will be targeted by a small range but heavy-hitting AoE, so we'll need to spread out after each smaller mechanic. She starts by using Rapturous Reach and cleaving one half of the room. Do note that this is not a 180 degree cleave, but more like a 210 degree cleave, so you cannot be directly north or south. Move to the safe side to dodge the cleave, and then move to pre-assigned spread positions for the Shiva damage. You can have a healer assigned to the exact center of the arena for their spot just to make healing a little bit easier. Next, she will start channeling two primals which will go off at the same time. Each primal has the following effect. Ramu will create a large circle AoE in the center, Leviathan will shoot line AoEs down the east and west sides of the room, Rocktopasta will cleave the north and south of the room, leaving very narrow safe spots on the east and west, and Garuda will cleave the cardinal directions, leaving the intercardinals safe. Just look at which primal she's channeling, move to the safe spots, and then spread again after it goes off. Junction Titan is a little bit spicier. On traditional jobs, this would target healers with untelegraphed, heavy-hitting stack AoEs after the Rapturous Reach and Primal mechanic. Since we have no healer role, it targets two random people. To make things worse, there is no consistency in the targeting like there is with things like the Suzaku AoEs or with Gavel debuffs. It is completely random, but there are a few ways that we can handle this. The first and probably simplest way is the way my group handled this, which is we just treated it like normal, split into light parties, and hope for the best. It sounds dumb, but you do make it through about a third of the time still, and it's the first mechanic in the fight, so if we die, it's not really a big deal, and we just run it back. Another way to handle this is to do an 8-person stack with every mitigation available to us. That means Mighty Guard, Adel, Magic Hammer, Bad Breath, and Gobskin. It is literally everything except for Diamondback. With every mitigation up, we will actually survive getting hit by both AoEs. This is the most consistent if you get your mitts correct, but if any are missing, it is a guaranteed wipe. A third way to handle this is to split into 4 pairs with Mighty Guard up, making the damage split similar to 4-person stacks. This works pretty decently, and we would make it through about 3/4 of the time this way. And on top of that, if a pair dies, we are able to actually res and keep the pull going, which is kind of nice. It's up to your group to decide how you want to handle it. Each way is perfectly viable. If you do one of the strats that involves Mighty Guard, just make sure to remove it after the second stack goes off. Otherwise, threat will get a little bit hairy. One other thing to point out is that while the junction mechanics are going off, you will want whoever brought Frog Legs and a Veil to use Frog Legs so that they're second on threat. Basically any time during the junction mechanic is fine, since the boss doesn't actually auto-attack during the whole mechanic. After the junction mechanic ends, the boss will use Formless Judgment, a heavy-hitting tank buster that applies 2 different vulns and hits twice to the 2 players with the highest threat. We handle this really easily. The main tank uses Diamondback, and the off tank uses a Veil on the main tank. It's still quite a bit of damage. The second hit will hit the tank for about 15k through Diamondback, so just make sure they're healthy before it happens. Then we've got another Maleficium before we go into Diamond Dust. Diamond Dust is a really heavy-hitting raid-wide that after a few seconds turns the ground to ice and makes it slippery. There's a ton of damage throughout this entire mechanic, so everyone should just have Mighty Guard on the entire time. Normally this mechanic involves a 4-person stack targeting healers, light parties sliding out to safe spots to share the stack, sliding out to drop icicles without overlapping each other, and then stretching tethers from icicles without hitting other players. Since the stack goes on a random person, this makes things confusing. You technically can do this mechanic the normal way by quickly adjusting around. Sometimes using Loom can be helpful for that, but it's more trouble than it's worth. Instead, allow me to introduce you to my preferred strategy, Dingus Dust. This mechanic becomes really easy if we just give up on trying to do it properly. Instead, what we do is we start in the middle to heal up after the initial damage, then we move out to our clock position. You can either wait for the ground to get slippery and then slide out, or you can move out to your spot before the ground gets slippery. Either way, once you are at your spot and the ground has become slippery, you will just hard cast a Diamondback. The stack will go off, everyone will eat 1 circle, but everyone will be alive. The 2 people who got targeted with the stack will have damage downs, but that's not really a big deal because we're in Mighty Guard anyway, and we're going to be moonfluting after those fall off regardless. Next, move into the center for some quick heals. Get ready to stretch your tether such that you're directly behind the icicle opposite the one you're tethered to. You can either use Surecast when the second ground AoEs appear, or you can ride the knockback. Either one is fine. After the icicles fire, meet back in the center to heal up and take down Mighty Guard for your second Moonflute window. After a raid wide and some amount of time, the boss will cast Earthen Fury and go into the Boulders phase. Earthen Fury hurts, like really badly, so mitigate appropriately with Bad Breath, Addle, and Magic Hammer, and of course Gobskin. If you did this fight at level 80, you might remember the common Dwayne strategy for handling boulders. This can still work fine if you are good at adjusting, but I made some modifications to the strategy that puts the orange icons adjacent to each other to make adjusting even easier. The asymmetry is a little bit annoying, but in my experience, this strategy is way more consistent overall. I call this strategy Bingus Boulders, and that's just because the emoji that I used on it is more Bingus. The goal here is to always have oranges run straight west and adjust as needed. Yellows are going to spread out clockwise from the orange spaces, and blue is always south with the second one in either the east or the northeast as needed. It's important to apply mitigations between each hit, since each hit is quite a bit of damage. And also make sure to return to the middle to heal after each hit, and since it's just a ton of damage. When you return to the middle, it can be helpful to return to your assigned clock positions to make it easier to see who should be adjusting where. Once you've gotten some practice on this mechanic, it actually becomes really easy. My group had maybe 1 wipe to this mechanic once we switched to using Bingus Boulders instead of trying to do Dwayne. It's really consistent, really easy. After a bit of a delay, we go into the Sculptures phase. The boss will cast a Primal Mechanic and use Obliteration Beam, which is a line stack AoE on a random target. When dodging the Primal Mechanic, we want everyone to move in the same direction and stay stacked up. My group preferred south and east as our directions for dodging. South and west would be fine too, but I would recommend south because right after, we need to pull the boss to the south side of the arena and face her either directly north or south. At this point, she's going to stock a Primal Mechanic, and we'll need to remember what that combination is for later. Shortly after, 2 players will be targeted with stack markers. Normally this would be on healers as before, but as with Diamond Dust it also targets 2 random players. So what we're going to do is make 2 light party conga lines on the north and south of her before these go out. If you have 2 stacks on one side, just have the stack marker closer to the boss swap sides and the person closest to the boss on the other side also swap sides, leaving you with 2 4-person stacks. After the stack goes off, players should spread out. The 2 sculptures will each tether to 4 players and mark their tethers with the numbers 1 through 4. The statues will be shooting line AoEs at their targets that apply a vuln and deal pretty high damage. Remember which statue you're tethered to and what your number is because the markers will be disappearing. The boss will use Rapturous Reach, so dodge to the safe side while having the 2 1 markers point their lasers north and south-ish away from the group, which should be stacked on whatever the safe side is. After the first laser goes off, the 1s rejoin the group and the 2s point their lasers straight north or south. Repeat this with the 3s and the 4s. When the 3s are being hit, the southeast or southwest will start glowing. This indicates where the knockback will be coming from after the 4th laser. The party can move to whichever side the knockback is going to come from, and as soon as the 4 lasers go off, the 4s should join the party. This is pretty fast, so sprint is recommended, especially for the south 4 person. After the knockback, the party needs to move into the safe spot of whatever the previously stocked Primal Mechanic was. After the knockback and the Primal Mechanic, there is another raid wide followed by another Tank Buster combo. Next up is the most infamous mechanic in this entire tier and one of the most infamous mechanics of all time. Lions. Fortunately, it's not actually that difficult. Your group can use whatever strategy you want for this as they're pretty much all valid. My group used the Billy Billy or Cross Lion strat. Some groups like doing the Line strat, but it ultimately doesn't matter as long as we do the setup the same. Since we don't have role groups to know who gets assigned what, we need to do another light party conga line on the north and south of the boss. Once the tethers go out, the small lion players know exactly where they need to go for the rest of the mechanic. Of the remaining people, the 2 northernmost people will handle the north big lion baiting, and the 2 southernmost people will handle the south big lion baiting. Whoever is closer to the lion, or rather whoever starts closer to the lion in each pair, will be doing the first and the third baits, while the other person will be doing the second bait. Once the setup is done, the mechanic plays out essentially the same as it would for normal jobs. If your group is struggling with this mechanic, there are some adjustments that can be made. First, you can't have everyone just turn on Mighty Guard the entire time for extra safety. If you're having trouble with the tether lines, you can also point them directly off the edge of the arena instead of trying to do any of the fancy strats. If you're tethered to a lion on the side being cleaved, you can also just totally eat the cleave and heal yourself with White Wind. If you have Mighty Guard up, it's not actually that dangerous. You can avoid the cleave, but you need to move as soon as the cast finishes for Rapturous Reach. If you wait for the cleave animation to show, you are already way too late because the animation happens about 1.5 seconds after the actual cast has finished. Regardless of which strategy you use, the mechanic is going to play out the same. Point tethers where they need to be, and bait the big lion. Come in for heals, and then use either your knockback immunity or get knocked back to where you need to go. Then dodge the stocked Primal Mechanic and handle the lions for a 3rd time, and then dodge the cleave. Once Lions is done, there's going to be another raid wide, and then the boss will stock a Primal Mechanic. This is followed by a Junction Titan or Shiva from the start of the fight, but it only does the spreader stack 1 time instead of twice. At this point, if you get Titan, I would recommend just diamondbacking for full safety, but Shiva can be handled exactly the same way as before. Note that the boss will cast a Primal Mechanic at the same time, which is when you need to dodge, and not the stocked one from before. After the spread or stack, there will be a raid wide, so quickly heal up both before and after. After the raid wide, the boss will do whichever junction it didn't do before, and this time it will use the previously stocked Primal Mechanic. After the second junction, there is another set of tank busters, there are 2 raid wides, and then finally the enrage. Most groups will kill the boss shortly after lions. Skipping lions is possible, but it's not really worth the effort compared to just doing lions in the first place. I've seen some wacky attempts at trying to do like single healer 7 DPS stuff, and those kills have actually been slower than my week 1 kill, so it doesn't really matter too much. You're going to be just doing lions anyway. Since there's not really anything that's worth skipping, just do the safe strats. You know, anything after Lions, I mean, it's just stuff that we've seen before. So just do the safe strats, don't worry about things like Revenge Blasting too much, and you'll get there with some practice. The sting percentage for this boss is really low, by the way. It's like 5%, so it's pretty much whenever a mechanic is stable and the boss is really low, then you can just go ahead and send it. But it's super low, so you'll probably end up killing the boss during a mechanic anyway. But anyway, thanks for watching, stay tuned for more Blue Mage content, and good luck out there.